Literally no offense to anything. They're very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of 7 dwarves living in a cave. What the are you doing, man?
This would have been a lot better if they, had a strong male along with her, a prince, if it wasn't about socialism, if they didn't remove the dwarves, if they had real dwarves.
The fairy tale we all thought we knew has transformed into Hollywood's latest cautionary tale. Subscribe now to discover the shocking details behind Disney's most controversial remake in years. What happens when a beloved classic collides with modern sensibilities? The Snow White remake, starring Rachel Zegler, was meant to breathe fresh life into Disney's first-ever animated feature. Instead, it descended into what industry insiders now call the Snow White disaster. A perfect storm of creativity.
They're remaking the movie. They just got rid of the dwarves. Okay,
but what do they call them?
Why would they get rid of the dwarves, though?
Magical creatures.
But they have one token dwarf amongst these magical creatures.
Creative confusion, public backlash, and behind-the-scenes drama that may have permanently altered how Hollywood approaches its most treasured stories. But the most intriguing twist? Reports that Zegler herself privately blamed none other than Peter Dinklage for igniting the controversy that derailed the entire production. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on this fascinating Hollywood saga. It all began with a single interview. Peter Dinklage, the Emmy-winning actor known for his role in Game of Thrones.
You actually just went backwards. You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it. The disability, like we're a disability group. You just erased that whole image.
Appeared on a podcast and delivered a critique that would send shockwaves through Disney's carefully orchestrated plans. Literally no offense to anyone, Dinklage said, but I was a little taken aback that they were very proud to cast a Latina actress as Snow White, but you're still telling the story of Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story about 7 dwarves living in a cave.
Argument should have been from Peter Dinklage. There's power of being on TV. There's power of television. And to put 7 people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney movie, there's still power there.
Words landed like a bombshell at Disney headquarters. Almost overnight, what should have been a straightforward modernization of a classic fairy tale transformed into a lightning rod for controversy. The studio, which had been proudly touting its inclusive casting of Rachel Zegler, suddenly found itself accused of perpetuating harmful stereotypes through its portrayal of the 7 dwarfs. Industry analysts noted how quickly Disney shifted into damage control mode. Reports emerged that
if the story is offensive, change the story, don't change the characters.
Executives were scrambling to revise the script, reconsider how the dwarfs would be portrayed, and reassess the entire creative direction of the film. What had been months of careful planning dissolved into what one insider described as creative panic. As the dust from Dinklage's comments began to settle, the production appeared to enter a tailspin. Sources close to the project revealed that multiple script revisions were ordered in rapid succession. The story that had once been a straightforward
Peter Dinklage destroyed Disney, and it could end up costing the company over $100 million.
Adaptation with minor modern updates was being pulled in contradictory directions. Test screenings revealed the consequences of this creative confusion. Audiences reported a film that felt tonally inconsistent, scenes that honored the whimsical nature of the original classic awkwardly butted against heavy-handed attempts at contemporary messaging. The magical elements that had enchanted generations now seemed at odds with Disney's frantic attempts to address Dinklage's
Disney has cast Rachel Zegler to play Snow White, which caused a lot of controversy because Zegler is Hispanic and the character is traditionally German.
criticisms. What made matters worse was that these changes weren't happening in the early development phase, but well into production. Scenes that had already been filmed suddenly needed to fit within a revised narrative framework. The result, according to those who witnessed early cuts, was a disjointed story that struggled to find its identity. Behind closed doors, the creative team reportedly fractured into competing camps. Some pushed to preserve the fairy tale.
That controversy is being compared to Halle Bailey's Little Mermaid, which did lose $50 million, making only $555 million in a budget of $250 million.
Essential elements while making thoughtful updates. Others advocated for sweeping changes that would distance the remake from any potentially problematic elements of the original. Between these opposing visions, the film's cohesive direction began to disintegrate. What followed was an even more complex debate about representation in Hollywood. while Dinklage's concerns highlighted legitimate issues about how people with dwarfism have been portrayed in
Peter Dinklage comes into this as when Rachel Zegler was cast, he laughed at Disney saying it's fake progressivism. The reason being that Peter Dinklage, who does have achondroplasia, finds the depiction of the Seven Dwarfs very offensive.
Entertainment. His comments inadvertently sparked a different controversy altogether. Dylan Postl, an actor with dwarfism, publicly criticized Dinklage's stance, arguing that his comments had actually hurt employment opportunities for little people in Hollywood. Peter Dinklage may have been offended, Postl said in an interview, but as a community,
Peter Dinklage said that Disney casting Rachel Zegler is their way to feel good about themselves while ignoring a much bigger problem.
Think differently. There's now an effort in Hollywood not to cast little people and instead do things like cast Hugh Grant as an Oompa Loompa with CGI. This counter-argument revealed the complexity of the situation. Disney's solution, reportedly replacing the traditional dwarfs with magical creatures, seemed to satisfy neither camp. Those who shared
Peter Dinklage was criticized by some actors with similar conditions, like Dylan Postl said Peter Dinklage was being selfish and that community needs more work.
Dinklage's concerns felt the studio was merely sidestepping a substantive conversation about representation. Others, like Postl, argued that removing roles traditionally played by little people was erasure rather than progress. There's power in being on TV, one advocate noted. To put 7 people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney
There's now an effort in Hollywood to not cast little people and instead do things like cast Hugh Grant as an Oompa Loompa.
movie, there's still power there. The controversy highlighted a fundamental question that Hollywood continues to grapple with. What does authentic, respectful representation actually look like? And who gets to decide? Throughout this growing controversy, one person was increasingly thrust into an impossible position. Rachel Zegler
is supposed to play Snow White. She's Latina. It says, literally no offense to anyone, but I was a little taken aback that they were very proud to cast a Latina actress as Snow White, but you're still telling the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Speculated this was likely due to contractual obligations or studio directives. But as production continued and negative press mounted, rumors began circulating about her private frustrations. The most explosive of these rumors suggested that Zegler had confided to associates that she blamed Peter Dinklage for triggering the cascade of changes that had derailed the film.
Take a step back and look at what you're doing there. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but then you're still making that backwards story about 7 dwarves living in a cave together. What the fuck are you doing, man? Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough.
According to these unverified claims, she believed that his comments, while well-intentioned, had sent Disney into a reactive spiral that ultimately compromised the film's creative integrity. Whether these rumors were true or merely speculative, they added yet another layer to the unfolding drama. Zegler, who had initially been celebrated for breaking barriers as a Latina Snow White, now found herself at the center of a controversy that had little to do with her performance and...
I mean, there's the easy joke of, well, we didn't see you on the soapbox, Peter.
It's true.
But everything to do with the studio's panicked response to criticism. Her position reflected the impossible balancing act faced by actors caught in cultural crossfires. How to support a project they've committed to while acknowledging legitimate concerns about representation and storytelling. Every public appearance, every social media post became subject to intense scrutiny as fans and critics alike searched for...
It's this weird thing where he's saying, like, oh, it's bad that we're still doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, so he doesn't necessarily want that. But as little people actors, it's like, well, we kind of want to work. We kind of want...
clues about her true feelings on the matter. As the film limped toward release, the phrase Snow White disaster became commonplace in industry discussions. Test screenings reportedly continued to yield lukewarm responses, with audiences finding the film's message confused and its execution clumsy. Perhaps most telling were the rumors that began circulating about Disney's plans to distance itself from the project. Industry insiders whispered about the possibility of a second Snow White adaptation, a complete reboot with a new cast, new director, and new creative approach. When Jenna Ortega's name began trending as a fan-favorite alternative, it seemed to confirm that even Disney might be losing faith in its own production. The studio's marketing strategy shifted noticeably. Rather than the full-court press typically associated with major Disney releases, promotional efforts appeared muted. Critics observed how the campaign seemed to downplay certain elements of the film while emphasizing others, as though the studio was still unsure how to position a project that had become so controversial. For Zegler, this period must have been particularly challenging. Having signed on to what should have been a career-defining role in an iconic Disney adaptation, she instead found herself associated with a troubled production that industry analysts were already labeling a disappointment before it had even
that part, and if that's what's available, then that's what we'd like to do. But at the same time, I get what he's saying, because yeah, people are like, well, was it that bad? I go, yeah, because at the time, Dwarves really didn't have any representation.
Been released. Beyond the specific details of this production, the Snow White disaster represents something larger, a cultural inflection point in how Hollywood approaches its most treasured stories. For decades, Disney had successfully navigated the delicate balance of updating classics while preserving their nostalgic appeal. But Snow White presented unique challenges. As the studio's first animated feature and a cornerstone of its identity, any attempt to modernize the story carried heightened risks. What the controversy revealed was the fundamental tension between honoring beloved tales and acknowledging how cultural sensibilities have evolved. When Peter Dinklage questioned the portrayal of the Seven Dwarfs, he wasn't merely critiquing a casting decision. He was challenging the underlying assumptions of a story that generations had accepted without question. Disney's frantic response, allegedly rewriting major elements of the story while production was already underway, highlighted how unprepared even the most powerful studios can be when confronted with these cultural reckonings. Rather than having engaged thoughtfully with these questions during development, the production found itself making reactive changes under intense public scrutiny. The result was a film that satisfied no one, not traditionalists who wanted a faithful adaptation.
Because right now there's more dwarves on this podcast than there are in the new Snow White movie. And that's probably due to Peter Dinklage.
Yep.
Not progressives who sought meaningful updates, and not the audiences caught in between who simply wanted a cohesive, engaging story. If there's a moral to this behind-the-scenes story, it's that modernizing beloved classics requires more than surface-level changes or reactionary decisions. It demands a clear, consistent vision that respects both the source material and contemporary values, and the courage to stand by that vision when inevitable criticisms arise. Disney's hurried attempts to address Dinklage's concerns while maintaining the story's traditional elements created something that felt inauthentic on both fronts. The lesson for studios is clear. These challenging conversations about representation and outdated tropes need to happen early in development, not midway through production when the creative foundation has already been laid. For actors like Rachel Zegler, the controversy serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly factors beyond their control can reshape public perception of their work. Despite her talent and commitment, her performance became inseparable from the swirling controversies surrounding the production. And for audiences, the saga offers insight into the complex negotiations happening behind the scenes of their favorite films.
Or can we just say midgie? Okay. Midget, dwarf, they're out of work. They're replaced by CGI things. Yes. Like, this is just a perfect
example. That.
When there's
thing 12.
There's no guiding principle, just progress for the sake of progress, and you're just trying to weave around a fence after a
single critique can ripple through an entire production, transforming the final product in ways both visible and invisible. As Hollywood continues adapting beloved stories for new generations, the Snow White disaster will likely serve as both warning and guide. It reminds us that even fairy tales must evolve, but that evolution...
And someone goes like, hey, Seven Dwarves is offensive to midgets. You're like, oh, okay, so let's just not employ any of them.
Yes, Peter Dinklage.
Requires thoughtfulness, courage, and a willingness to engage sincerely with difficult questions about representation and cultural values. Whether Disney learns from this experience remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. The next time a studio attempts to modernize a classic tale, the ghost of this controversy will hover just off screen, a reminder of how quickly the path from once upon a time to happily ever after can veer off course. So what do you think? Did Peter Dinklage's criticism derail Disney's Snow White, or was the production already headed for trouble? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories from Hollywood's most controversial productions.